Welcome to News Around World, and this is News This Week, your go-to source for the latest and most important news from around the globe. On this channel, we'll cover a wide range of topics, from politics to science, from business to entertainment, to ensure you stay informed about the events shaping our world. We bring you the top stories of the week, every week. So make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon for notifications, so you never miss an episode. Let's dive in and explore the news together. Russia has increased its missile strikes on cities in Ukraine as part of its plan to defeat the population through bombing. One missile struck a housing complex in Dnipro, resulting in the deaths of at least 40 individuals, which is the most significant loss of civilian lives during Russia's current operation. The attacks have primarily focused on energy facilities, causing extensive power outages during the winter months. Christine Lambrecht resigned from her position as Germany's defense minister. Her credibility had been affected by several blunders, including suggesting to provide Ukraine with helmets when they were in need of heavy weapons. Boris Pistorius has been appointed as the new defense minister. His appointment came at a time when Germany's allies were urging the government to send Leopard tanks to Ukraine, which the government has been resisting. A judge from the Brazilian Supreme Court has granted a request from prosecutors to include former right-wing President Jair Bolsonaro in an investigation into the storming of government buildings by his supporters this month. The newly elected president, Luiz Inácio da Silva, has also dismissed 40 soldiers who were on duty outside the presidential palace during the demonstrations. China's population has decreased for the first time since the 1960s. The Chinese government has long been trying to persuade people to have more children. With a declining labor force and an aging population, the country will face increasing economic and health system pressures. This population decline is also a blow to national pride, as India is expected to surpass China as the world's most populous country. A plane crash near the popular tourist destination of Pokhara in Nepal resulted in the deaths of all 72 passengers on board. It is the worst aviation incident to occur in Nepal in the last 30 years. In the Philippines, Maria Ressa and her news organization, Rapala, have been acquitted of tax evasion by a court in Manila. Ms. Ressa, who was a joint winner of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021, drew the wrath of former President Rodrigo Duterte when she investigated his controversial war on drugs. Iran has carried out the execution of Ali Reza Akbari, a British Iranian who was convicted by the regime of espionage. Mr. Akbari was arrested in 2019, and was previously the deputy Iranian defense minister. He claimed that he had been tortured and coerced into confessing to crimes he did not commit. Senior officials from the United States and Russia will be traveling to Africa as part of the increasing competition for influence on the continent. Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary of the United States, is scheduled to visit Senegal, South Africa, and Zambia in an effort to counteract the economic and political influence of China, which has been a major financier of infrastructure projects. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, will also be visiting South Africa. Eric Adams, the Democratic mayor of New York, visited the US-Mexico border and announced that his city could no longer accommodate any more illegal migrants. He also criticized the Biden administration's approach to migration. New York has received a large number of migrants, in part because certain Republican states have actively transported them to areas controlled by Democrats.
The Interior Minister of Ukraine died in a helicopter crash in the outskirts of Kyiv. The aircraft went down in thick fog close to a nursery, resulting in a total of 14 deaths. The Interior Ministry is in charge of domestic security and has played a role in collecting evidence of Russian war crimes. The Italian police apprehended Matteo Messina Denaro, who is considered to be Italy's most wanted mafia criminal, after he had evaded capture for 30 years. He was apprehended in Palermo while he was visiting a clinic under an assumed name. The arrest is being celebrated as the end of a 30-year effort to weaken the control of the Cosa Nostra over Sicily. The UK government has vetoed the gender recognition bill passed by the Scottish Parliament. This is the first time a Scottish law has been blocked since devolution in 1999. The Westminster government argued that allowing people in Scotland to change their gender more easily would negatively affect equalities protections across the UK. The First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, has vowed to take legal action on the issue. Additionally, the UK government has reversed its previous decision and stated that a new law banning conversion therapy will now include transgender people. China has reported 59,938 deaths related to COVID-19 between December 8 and January 12. This is the first time the government has released such detailed figures since abandoning its zero COVID policy last month. However, the actual number of deaths is believed to be much higher. The official statistics only refer to deaths recorded in medical facilities, and doctors have been discouraged from listing COVID-19 as the cause of death on death certificates. In a sudden statement, Jacinda Ardern announced that she will be stepping down as the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Ms. Ardern led her country through the pandemic in ways that often sparked controversy, such as shutting the borders for 2 years. Her approval rating has recently dropped and she stated that she no longer has the energy to remain in office. The national elections were scheduled for October this year. The Supreme Court in Israel has blocked the appointment of Aryeh Deri as Interior Minister and Vice Prime Minister, due to his previous conviction for tax fraud. This ruling puts Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who also faces charges of bribery and fraud, in conflict with the court. His government has proposed reforms for the court that would limit its powers and, according to his opponents, would weaken Israeli democracy. Over 80,000 protesters gathered in Tel Aviv to demonstrate against this plan. Terrorists in Burkina Faso have abducted 50 women and girls who were searching for food in the vicinity of a town that has been under siege by the insurgents. Since 2015, thousands of individuals have been killed and millions have been forced to flee their homes and farms as the result of the cross-border incursions of terrorists from Mali. Allegations have surfaced of classified documents found at Joe Biden's private residence, and a special counsel being appointed by the Justice Department to investigate his handling of the material. Republicans have also reportedly called for the release of visitor logs to the home, highlighting that similar requests were made by Democrats during a previous FBI search of Donald Trump's residence.
The annual inflation rate in the UK decreased slightly in December, to 10.5%. The government has pledged to reduce the rate by half this year. Food prices have increased by 16.9% over the last 12 months, which is the fastest pace in decades. In contrast, the inflation rate in the US dropped to 6.5% in December, and in the Eurozone it fell to 9.2%. Several of Brazil's major banks, including BTG Pactual and Santander Brazil, have been left exposed to debt from Americanas, a large retail chain that has reported accounting inconsistencies, leading to the resignation of its CEO and CFO. Facing the possibility of bankruptcy, Americanas has been granted a month's protection from its creditors by the courts. The news of its potential collapse caused its stock to drop by 77% in a day, the largest fall for any company on the Ibovespa index in at least 20 years. China's economy only grew by 3% in 2022, marking the weakest expansion since 1976, with the exception of 2020. The year was marked by more widespread lockdowns in China, which disrupted factories and consumer spending. China's exports in December also decreased by 9.9% year-on-year in dollar terms, the steepest decline since the beginning of the pandemic. Highlighting the sharp increase in demand for air travel following nearly 3 years of COVID-19 restrictions, Europe's largest airline, Ryanair, received 4.95 million bookings in 1 week, the most it has ever received. United Airlines also reported that its profit in the fourth quarter of 2022 was almost a third higher than in the same period of 2019, prior to the pandemic. Microsoft has announced plans to cut 10,000 jobs, approximately 5% of its workforce, as part of a series of layoffs by technology companies dealing with a slowdown in sales following the end of the pandemic. The trial began for Elon Musk on charges of securities fraud related to a misleading tweet he posted in 2018 that suggested he was taking Tesla private. A group of investors is suing him, alleging they lost billions in the market reaction to the tweet. It is possible that Mr. Musk may settle the case before the trial concludes. Potential jurors displaying hostility towards Mr. Musk, including one who described him as a delusional narcissist, were removed from the final jury selection.
The markets were taken aback by the Bank of Japan's decision to maintain its policy of managing the yield on Japanese long-term government bonds. Investors had anticipated that the central bank would indicate a change in its monetary policy, following the increase of the fluctuation cap, above or below a target of 0, on 10-year bond yields in December. The bank has also spent 34 trillion yen, $265 billion, buying bonds to keep yields low. The yen depreciated by 2% against the dollar following the announcement. Goldman Sachs reported a decline in profit for the fourth quarter, partly due to a decrease in investment banking activity. The bank is cutting 6.5% of its workforce, including investment bankers, as part of a cost-saving initiative. Despite this, Goldman's net profit for the entire year of 2022 was $11.3 billion. Other banks have also reported similar results. Didi Global announced that China's Network Security Office has granted it permission to register new users to its ride-hailing service, 18 months after people were prohibited from downloading its app during a crackdown on China's tech giants. DD came under scrutiny from authorities when it listed its shares on the New York Stock Exchange in 2021, and subsequently delisted its stock. The resumption of normal service suggests that the government now views tech companies as drivers of economic growth rather than potential political risks. The reopening of China's economy after achieving zero COVID will have a significant impact on several industries this year. According to the International Energy Agency, oil demand is expected to reach a record high of 101.7 million barrels per day, with around half of that increase coming from China, despite uncertainty surrounding the pace of reopening. The World Tourism Organization also cited the return of Chinese tourists as a factor in its forecast that international holiday making could reach 80 to 95% of pre-pandemic levels. In 2022, the German GDP grew by 1.9%, despite the energy crisis and the indirect impacts of the war in Ukraine. The German Economy Ministry believes that the economic slowdown in the upcoming months will be milder and shorter than anticipated. After months of efforts to avoid bankruptcy, Britishvolt has turned to administrators for help. The battery-making startup had been promoted by the British government 3 years ago as part of its Green Industrial Revolution. On the same day that the company collapsed, the Business Committee in the House of Commons initiated an inquiry into the feasibility of manufacturing batteries in Britain for electric cars, noting a series of setbacks in the industry.
That's all for this week's episode of News This Week on News Around the World. We hope you found it informative and engaging. We'll be back next week with more of the latest and most important news from around the globe. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.